But actually spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up in a kind of ugly tech fix.
You can spray something into the atmosphere to change. Okay.
Spray pollution into the atmosphere to stop it warming.
How do you do this?
You'd start with a fleet of modified business jets and each year you have to put a little more. Mm-hmm. This doesn't, in the long run, mean that you can forget about cutting emissions. We will need to rein in emissions.
No, we'll get to it eventually. But in the meantime, we're shrouding the Earth in sulfuric acid.
So people are terrified about talking about this because they're scared that it will prevent us cutting emissions.
Right, and also that it's sulfuric acid.
We put 50 million tons of sulfuric acid in the air now as pollution, and it kills 1 million people a year worldwide.
Okay. But it'll be better if we put more in.
We're talking about 1% of that.
1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math.
It started just like any other day. Then everything we thought we knew was gone. The lucky ones were dead in seconds. And when the country crumbled, we divided ourselves into tribes.
What happens to the sulfuric acid after it's sprayed? Does it just stay up there?
No, it rains down, but it's a tiny addition to what we're already doing.
Is there any possible way this could come back to bite us in the end?
The lucky ones were dead in seconds. And when the country crumbled, we divided ourselves into tribes.
You ever look at those planes up there? They have contrails behind them. Maybe all those planes with the contrails, maybe they're actually spraying chemicals into the atmosphere right now, and Uncle Sam isn't telling us.
Seems extremely unlikely.
That the United States is not telling something to its citizens? That seems extremely likely to me. Read the newspaper. I think they might have your idea already.
We're doing this, basically. Really not very much. And it's this stuff in the middle here, which is what you do if you don't stop the emissions quickly enough, and you need to somehow break the link between human actions that change climate and the climate change itself. And that's particularly important because, of course, while we can adapt to climate change, and it's important to be honest here, there will be some benefits to climate change. But of course, the natural world, polar bears, I spent time skiing across the sea ice for weeks at a time in the high Arctic. They will completely lose, and there's no adaptation. So this problem is absolutely soluble. This geoengineering idea in its simplest form is basically the following. You could put fine particles, say sulfuric acid particles, sulfates, into the upper atmosphere, the stratosphere, where they'd reflect away sunlight and cool the planet. And I know for certain that that will work. Not that there aren't side effects, but I know there's no big mystery about it. There's lots of mystery in the details, and there's some bad side effects, like it partially destroys the ozone layer, and I'll get to that in a minute. but it clearly cools down. And one other thing, it's fast. It's really important to say. So a bunch of the other things that we ought to do, like slowing emissions, are intrinsically slow because it takes time to build all the hardware we need to reduce emissions. And not only that, when you cut emissions, you don't cut concentrations, because concentrations, the amount of CO2 in the air, is the sum of emissions over time. So you can't step on the brakes very quickly. But if you do this, it's quick. And there are times below the surface. We weren't allowed to speak about it. Of course, we may be wrong. This hasn't all been peer reviewed. We're in the middle of thinking about it, but so far it seems good. But it looks like we could achieve long atmospheric lifetimes, much longer than before, because they're levitated. We could move things out of the stratosphere into the mesosphere, in principle solving the ozone problem. I'm sure there will be other problems that arise. It's amazing how we can affect the planet. The one thing about this is it gives us extraordinary leverage. This improved science and engineering will, whether we like it or not, give us more and more leverage to affect the planet, to control the planet, to give us weather and climate control. Not because we plan it, not because we want it, just because science delivers it to us bit by bit, with better knowledge of the way the system works and better engineering tools to affect it. Now suppose that space aliens arrived on, maybe they're going to land at the UN headquarters down the road here, or maybe they'll pick a smarter spot. A treaty that decides who gets to do this. Right now we may think of a big rich country like the US doing this, but it might well be that in fact if China wakes up in 2030 and realizes that the climate impacts are just unacceptable, they may not be very interested in our moral conversations about how to do this, and they may just decide they'd really rather have a geoengineered world than a non-geoengineered world, and we'll have no international mechanism to figure out who makes the decision.